IVM.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach, and today with us we have Avinash from Deep Rooted. And in the last episode, which is part 1, we discussed about what is the way in which we should start thinking about the fruits, what is the current cycle in which plants are produced, what is the supply chain, because it's important to understand where are fruits coming from, how is it coming to us, because food is such an important aspect of our life. So if you haven't heard the first episode, please go listen to that. Today, we're going to discuss in the second episode, what is the meaning of hydroponics? What is the meaning of organic? And what are the ways in which we can approach these? So I want to go into two completely different aspects. One is I want to understand the life journey of a consumer. So like people who are listening right now to us, I want us to think about what should their next step be on becoming more aware. So we'll start from the base. Like somebody is going to the local vegetable shop and on the market and buying fruits and vegetables from there. Right? At that stage, what are the kinds of things that they should be thinking about and looking of? Then we'll get to what should the next stage of evolution to coming to this point that we're talking about sustainability. So right from that stage, somebody sitting in Ludhiana, for example, right, going to the market, buying something. What should the next step, what should they be aware of? And then what should the next journey be?
The most common myth is that the freshest produce is available early in the morning, right? So that's why people tend to go really early, either to the market or to your local grocer for fruits and vegetables. But that is truly not the case, right? The freshest vegetables tend to be available in the evening because the chances are that it was harvested few hours before in the morning, right? So what you typically get in a market or in your nearby grocer in the morning would have been harvested actually practically the previous day morning. Through an intermediary led chain, it will come to the market, and your local grocer goes to the market in the morning and picks up the produce and stocks it. So the most common myth that we also hear from our consumers is I tend to buy in the morning because it's the freshest. There's a great chance that it is not the freshest because its life cycle is far longer than what a grocer may buy in the morning to sell it in the evening, right? So that's just a common myth that it's not really true that morning produce is the freshest produce, right? To your question of how should the consumer actually evolve, I mean these are the basic questions, right? I mean the first question, especially, maybe I'll talk about three categories, if you will, right? If you take the most highly perishable, I mean rarely we are concerned about the shape of a potato and an onion because they're not perishable. If you take greens, right, the most common thing you want to know is when was it harvested and where was it grown. Again, there's a good chance that your local grocer may have no idea because he's buying from an aggregator. But it makes a great difference if it was grown 50 kilometers away from the city or if it was grown 150 kilometers away from the city. The sheer 2 hours additional transit means that it may not be fresher. Your local grocer also may not be able to answer how was it grown, what was the processes followed, because again it's an intermediary led supply chain. But yeah, from a quality freshness point of view, a simple question of where was it grown or which region was it grown, and when did he buy it or when was it harvested is a sort of a very hygiene question. And also a counterintuitive point is in greens, whether it's fresh or no, because if the leaves look shriveled or shrunk, that, either it's not fresh or it's a very old produce. Then there are a certain set of produces like your greens and capsicums and cucumbers, which can actually last you don't harvest those every day in the field. They are like an alternate day or once in 3 days sort of a harvest cycle. They tend to remain fairly fresh and a good quality, even though it is harvested after 1 or 2 days. Right there, it's not about where was it grown, but yeah, probably when was it harvested. Right? Did you receive the produce today morning or was it yesterday? Again, the physical indications of them being soft, slightly becoming paler in color. A green capsicum starts becoming gets wrinkles, or color starts becoming pale. And then
Are there tips and
and
tricks that the grocers use to keep them fresh? Things that we need to be watching out for, things that we need to be.
yeah, they tend to sprinkle water most of the times on top of the produce. They tend to keep sort of rotating the produce over and above. So that the same produce is not getting exposed to the sun. So if it is not, if it is an if the produce is kept in the open, yeah, that's what they tend to do. That they keep rotating the produce, taking the ones that are underneath and bringing it to the top, bringing it. Sprinkling water on top of it. Sprinkling water on top may help to some extent, but if you do it for 8 to 10 hours over a greens, the chances are that yeah, it starts getting decayed as well, right?
Hmm.
So some of those elements in fruits we talked about it, right? I mean, most fruits, yeah. While there are a good set of local fruits, that's why if you see watermelons, right, they're cut open. Usually in the roadside when they're selling, they tend to cut few pieces open just to show that it is extremely red inside. But yeah, the chances are that you don't know. Like in melons, you do something called as a tap test, right? If the sound is actually appears fairly dense, it means the chances are that it's a well-ripened melon, as opposed to if the sound appears hollowish, the chances are that it's not well-ripened melon, right? So a whole lot of things for SKU wise by sight. Some of them are definitely visible. That's why lady's finger, you tend to sort of crack it open at the tip. A crispier one means that it is not over mature and it is of the right maturity for you to consume. Beans also you tend to crack open at the tip. So for every produce, in the lack of a tech enabled supply chain visibility, these are the common tips and tricks that most consumers, and even like when we go to shop, if at all we go step out to buy in an offline shop, these are the most common tricks or tips that people use to buy.
Lovely. So we start off with the local market, right? What is the next evolution of this? Is it a organized structure? Is there going to, like, for example, a nature's basket? What would the next level of awareness be?
Yeah, so I think the most common consumer mindset is a Kirana store tends to have better quality than a modern trade store. The reason being, your Kirana store guy is actually going and handpicking the produce early in the morning and then bringing it to his shop. Kirana stores tend to have lower variety and more focused set of products than a modern trade store, and therefore consumers still walk across their home slash apartments and buy in a kirana store. The next wave of organized retailer would be your modern trade stores. The way they would operate is most of them tend to have a collection center, which is in a village where which is a vegetable or a fruit cultivation zone. They farmers come and give the produce there. They take it from that center to their main warehouse in the city, and in turn it gets graded and then it comes to the shelf, right? So again, in a modern trade environment, uh, fruits and vegetables are important as a footfall driver, so they tend to focus on quality. But again, the way most modern trade operates, which is this multiple exchange of hands, means that, as I said, if you walk into any modern trade in the evening, you will not be really enthused with the quality of the produce, because yeah, it's 24 to 48 hours since the harvest, right? But yeah, from a organized environment point of view, after the kirana stores, it will be the modern trade stores.
Would it be a
The
level up for
next,
the consumer?
it will be a level up from a consumer, from a variety point of view, maybe.
Hmm.
From um, from
Quality?
it's always subjective. I mean, I wish there was a straightforward answer for this. Therefore, people don't have a single source for all of their fruits and vegetable needs, right? Because there's no guarantee that you walk into any kirana store or a modern trade store, the next day you go, the produce will be of the same quality, because they are not in control of the supply, right? I mean, today it could be farmer A, tomorrow it could be farmer B or an intermediary B, right? So
And the
practically
modern trade
this,
won't be able to tell you where it came from, how it was produced, and all of that. That they won't be able to.
No, largely no. I mean, yes, here and there for some products, for some categories, some modern trade, they may be able to, but uniformly no, because of the way they operate is an aggregator-led model where in a center, in a village, farmers are expected to come and give the produce, which in turn they take and handle, right? So the set of farmers that come, there's no traceability back to the farm. I could have collected from your farm and given it to a modern trade center. They may tell it's from Avinash's farm, but yeah, there's no guarantee, right? So
Fair.
from a I don't think it's a black or white in terms of from a quality point of view. Is that is A better than B? The answer is no, because of this lack of control in the supply chain.
Lovely. Then after that, what would be the next step of evolution?
I think, yeah, from a channel point of view, yes, a lot of your large e-commerce players, right, sort of after all other categories, now are figuring out how to solve for the fruits and vegetables or the grocery space, right? Because it's extremely unique in the challenge that it brings with because of the perishable nature of the produce, right? So there is no one size fits all solution, right? So it's not that.
But not from a channel point of view, but I'm saying leveling up from a quality point of view.
Yeah,
So what would
exactly.
the next quality?
Yeah, so I was coming to that. So again, even there are e-retailers today the benchmark for quality in fruits and vegetables? The honest answer is no, right? So while they have made early and good inroads into groceries, I think no consumer today is whole and soul relying on an e-retailer alone for their fruits and vegetables simply because of the lack of consistency and quality, right? And that is the big gap that we have seen, right? In order to build an end to end supply chain, which sort of convinces the consumer that we can be a one stop shop for their fruits and vegetables needs, as opposed to them trying to walk across the home and then realize, oh, today palak is not good here, let me go there, right? And why is that not happening? It is not because of any front end or technology challenge on the front end, but it's about all the work that has to happen on the supply side day in and day out to ensure that the produce comes with the right quality and freshness to the consumer.
Okay, lovely. So there's a slightly better option there. What would the next step in quality be?
In terms of the
Quality
consumer,
consumer.
if you want the again, I think the fundamental answer is there is no one source today
Hmm.
which can convince
So
the
then would you
consumer
get to
that
organic? Where would organic fit in? Where would hydroponics fit in? How would that evolution be?
yeah, so those are subcategories. So today, organic has become a moniker for clean fruits and vegetables,
Hmm.
right? Organic is a way of cultivation where you are not using chemicals either as a input to the soil for the plants to uptake nutrients or spraying chemicals on the plants, right? So again, sources which claim organic, can they validate whether it is truly grown in an organic manner? 8 out of 10, the chances are no, because there is no traceability built back into the supply chain. If you ask an average consumer, right, what does organic mean to you, they answer it as clean, right, without going into the technical definition of what truly organic means, right? That's point number one. Point number two, what about greenhouse and hydroponics? Yes, they are means to use the or means to use to grow the produce in a contamination free, clean manner without spraying chemicals and grow the same quality throughout the year. So, if an average consumer who's slightly knowledgeable about the means of growing tends to relate that a greenhouse or a polyhouse or a hydroponic grown produce tends to be of better quality than an average open field produce. And the reason for that is, yeah, in these methods of cultivation, you are actually controlling a whole lot of element that goes into growing the crop in a certain manner, and you're not relying only on nature or soil for ensuring that the plant grows in the right manner. So again, the target audience that we I talked about, which is 25-year-old to 45-year-old, I think are extremely articulate and nuanced today and are able to identify the differences between a greenhouse and an organic, or they understand the differences between the two.
Before going ahead, we'll take a quick break.
Hey everybody, it's been a great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast, Ashwin and DJ dive into all the major scoops from the first week of the IPL's 2021 second leg. They talk about the Indian women's team beating Australia in the third ODI, breaking their winning streak of 26. On KBCD, Farhad and Sunetra are in conversation with mental health practitioner Unnati Bharadwaj. They discuss loopholes in the mental health industry, especially for queer individuals, and how to come out safely to friends and family. On All Things Policy, Priyal Dalmeda and Ruturaj Govekar discuss the rationale behind booster shots. On Hans Vani, listen to an intriguing story called Aakhe about how our eyes see everything and yet sometimes fail to grasp reality. And on the Life Manifesto, Zarina talks about the implications of burnout. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any other show for that matter, please do tell a friend. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Inter. We appreciate the support.
Welcome back. Let's jump into the conversation. Let's discuss them right now. Let's go to each of these topics and just discuss what is open. What do you mean by open field? What do you mean by greenhouse? What do you mean by organic? What do you mean by hydroponics? Because I know a lot of whenever I discuss hydroponics, for example, with the listeners and on Instagram, people wonder what it is. So let's go and define each of these categories.
Yeah. So again, each one of them is a different means of cultivation. I'll start with the most commonly known or what has been around for a while now, which is organic. Organic means using no chemicals to grow the plants, right? So when or where in a life cycle does a plant require chemicals? The roots which are in the soil absorb nutrients for it to grow, right? You can either solely give them natural based inputs, compost, manure, etc. You enrich the soil over time and make it adequately balanced enough using all natural means. You grow the plant there, it absorbs nutrients from those, and then it grows, right? But at its core, the chemical constituents are same as what a water-soluble fertilizer would be used, right? So that's one means. So you don't use chemicals even in the as nutrients to the plants. The second is actually what you spray on the plants. And why do you spray on the plants? Either in times of certain seasons, or naturally they attract pests. One of the ways to ward off pests is to spray certain things on the plant, which acts as a deterrent for the pests to sort of destroy the yield or destroy the quality. Now that actually, again, in organic cultivation, they don't use any chemicals. So there are natural means like neem oil, and there are a whole set of natural inputs that they tend to spray on the plant instead of using chemicals. So that's organic. Now, how does a produce become certified organic? The true way is actually you go through a process depending on what the farmer was growing previously in that piece of land. You go through a period of no cultivation where you enrich the soil with natural inputs such that whatever chemical may have been used earlier, there are no more traces of that in the soil, and you've enriched it with natural means. So depending on what was grown, it is a 1 to 3 year process to get rid of the soil of its artificial chemicals, so to speak, and then you grow. Is there a well established auditing process in general to figure out if something is organic or no? I think no. Organic is generally a very trustworthy category. People, if they choose to trust someone who claims to be organic, then for them that produce is organic, irrespective of what may have been happening at the back end. Now coming to the next level of technical cultivation is protected environment cultivation, which means you give an artificial structure around the plants and protect it from harsh sun, rain, and pests. Right. So even within, and those structures are called greenhouses or polyhouses. Now within that, you can either grow in soil or you can grow in a soilless manner. Most people who grow within greenhouses use drip irrigation, right? You are not doing flood irrigation where you create natural channels and you have a drain of water there and the plants grow. No, you tend to use drip irrigation. Whenever drip irrigation is used, you use what is called as water soluble fertilizers, right? So again, just as a comparison, not one versus the other, in organic, what natural chemical may be found in a manure like a nitrogen or a calcium phosphate, here you take that calcium phosphate, you dissolve it in water, and you give it through a pump into the drip irrigation, the plants pick up, right? So, as fertilizers, you use water-soluble fertilizers, which are chemicals. All of them are approved for use in horticulture, right, or cultivation. Within a greenhouse, the advantage is the pest attack tends to be minimal, so you really don't have to spray any chemical on the plant. So again, what we do is we grow in a greenhouse, we or hydroponic, we use drip irrigation, which means we use chemical or water soluble fertilizers for the plants. But on the plant, we don't spray any chemicals because we are using other means to protect the plant from diseases. The advantage of hydroponics or polyhouse versus an open field cultivation is your quality, your output tends to be more deterministic than open field cultivation. You're not dependent on nature for the right amount of sunshine or a rainfall or pests not appearing, etc. Right? So here you are actually controlling all of those elements. So your yield tends to be higher, your product quality tends to be more uniform, and you're also able to deliver on the promise of a clean produce if you grow it within a greenhouse as opposed to growing it in an open field manner. So that's a fundamental difference, and for a farmer, more predictable the output means that yes, I mean his crop cycle is remunerative, and there's better income, right?
Can
The difference.
greenhouse products be considered organic?
No, in India, by technical definition, no. The organic certificate is given only to what is grown in soil, right? In the manner that I talked about, where you go through a process. Hydroponics or greenhouse grown produce today in India technically cannot be classified as organic. While in the US, hydroponic produce, I think last year there was a change in regulation there where true hydroponic growers can actually claim to or can call their produce organic. In India, it is not yet the case. The difference between polyhouse and hydroponic is going one step deeper in terms of the level of control that you exercise in the cultivation. So in greenhouse, you tend to grow again using soil, which means again there is a certain degree of dependency on the kind of soil, what was grown earlier, etc. Here you are completely removing that. You either grow in water or you grow in what is called as coco peat, which just acts as a physical anchor to the plant as opposed to that being the main source for nutrients. So irrespective of whether coco peat is used or water, again, the fundamental nutrition program or philosophy is water soluble fertilizers. And here you got to exercise much more control. You're able to monitor how much is the plant uptaking by doing measurements called as TDS, total dissolved salts. By measuring that, you're able to understand and predict how at the rate at which the plant is growing and things like that. So um, there is even more greater control and chances of even more greater predictability in the output quantity and quality in hydroponics when it comes to polyhouse. The flip side is because you are controlling every element of the cultivation, if you have only yourself to blame, so to speak, if the yield goes wrong, right? Because it's not that there is soil which acts as a buffer. If you're growing in an open field, if you tend to spray excess urea or if you give excess urea, the soil absorbs it, right? I mean, so the soil acts as a great buffer for any excesses that a farmer may do by way of cultivation. But at the same time, if there is deficiency, the farmer can't help it beyond a certain point. In hydroponics, that's not the case. There is no buffer. There is just the grower or the cultivator, and then there is the output, right? So the flip side of doing A greenhouse or B polyhouse cultivation is you are controlling everything. So you've got to be extremely vigilant, disciplined about the way you cultivate. But yeah, if someone is indeed all of that, then the output is undoubtedly significantly better, right? Because you don't have to grow anything 200 kilometers away. Like our farm when we began was actually just 50 kilometers away. Rather, is 50 kilometers away from the city, right? So imagine growing there, harvesting it in the evening at 6, delivering it to you next day morning 7. It's just about 12 to 14 hours between harvest and it reaching you, right? So the quality and the freshness is unparalleled when it comes to polyos and hydroponic, if done in the right manner. So those are the various means of cultivation. Obviously, there are, it can be done at different scales. It can be done in a rooftop. It can be done in a half an acre scale. It can be done in a large industrial scale. Um, if you look at the Western world, why are they doing polyhouse cultivation? They are doing polyhouse cultivation to solve for heat, right? They have extreme climatic conditions where the temperatures are extremely lower. So they build greenhouses, and they give it artificial light, they give it artificial heat so that they get the output. In India, you're not building greenhouses to solve for heat or light because we are abundantly blessed with both of them, right? Of course, we have a varied climatic zone, but on an average, we don't have to solve for light or heat. What people try to solve for, or what farmers try to solve for when they put greenhouse, is to get predictable output, because you are spending money on inputs, labor, etc. If you grow in open field, the output is not predictable in terms of quantity. I'm ignoring their market access problem, etc., but just the output is not predictable. So most farmers who have invested in a greenhouse infrastructure in India are trying to solve for the quantitative and qualitative output that they get, as opposed to solving for a fundamentally key weather related challenge, unlike in the West.
Because hydroponics is so interesting. Like I was watching a show where Elon Musk's brother is building these hydroponic towers
Yeah.
in old parking lots in various cities, right? So he's basically putting these container cartons, those container ship cartons and those
Yeah.
boxes, and inside them he's growing in greenhouse, and you can stack them up.
Yeah.
For people who've never seen a hydroponics farm, can you describe it? What does it look like?
It has a physical enclosure, so to speak. If you're doing it in the external world, um, it can either be grown at a ground level, or you can also have vertical slash semi-vertical structures. Again, in the West, when people are doing indoor cultivation, they are solving for light. Therefore, they tend to grow in old, unused warehouses where the cultivation happens in a vertical manner. In India, it is not the case. Land is abundant. In fact, land is lying unutilized today, right? Light is abundant. So most hydroponic cultivation in India happens in the outdoors, uh, uh, within a greenhouse. If it is grown in a coco peat, you have pots or you have channels made where you fill it with coco peat, and then you sow the plant in a traditional manner and it grows in a traditional manner. As I said, you will either have drip irrigation. A common architecture within hydroponics that is used is to grow it in water. So you create ponds, which are maybe 1.5 feet deep. You fill it with water and then you top it up with nutrients. And then you have styrofoam sheets with small holes made, which have cups. The plants actually grow within the cup. So when it comes to harvest, all you do sort of is pick up the cup, you chop the root, and then it's ready for consumption. Actually, literally, you can have it right there in the farm, right? So and most of the hydroponic infrastructure tends to be equipped with certain fans, dehumidifiers, which, as I said, helps to either bring the temperature down or bring the humidity down, because each of those parameters actually affects the way the produce is grown, right? So if you walk into a hydroponic greenhouse anywhere in the country, yeah, this is what you commonly see, where either you have pots and you have coco peat and they're growing it, or you have ponds made where plants are floating, so to speak, on a styrofoam sheet with their roots in the nutrient solution and uptaking it. And over and above that, there are various degrees of sophistication. Like, you can have automated controllers which actually sort of bring down the temperature, or as and when the humidity crosses a certain threshold, the dehumidifiers get switched on. If temperature increases to a certain level, there are mists which actually sort of spray water on the plant. So there are various degrees of sophistication today. Of course, each one brings with its own advantage. But yes, there's also an element of actually cost when it comes to investing in these infrastructures.
What does it cost to the consumer? So, typically when we compare it from the market wala shop, the kiranas, like you said, to the modern trade, to buying organic or buying hydroponic, how should a consumer start thinking about the cost? What is the cost jumps?
Yeah, so I think again, there's no black or white answer, because when you buy in a shop or wherever, the prices depend on the day, right? These are like commodity prices, right? As I said, now monsoons have started. The demand for greens is still the same. There will be supply related challenges, so the price will spike up. At some other part of the year, there will be enough supply, so the prices will be lower, right? So there's no one straight price comparison that you can do. But what you can definitely compare is on the value, right? While inherently the price of a hydroponic green tends to be more than an open field produce in your local grocer, the value that it brings, a part of it can be quantified, a part of it is actually intangible. The part that it can be quantified is, if you buy 1 kg of greens, or if you buy one bunch of 300-gram greens from your local grocer or wherever, when you come home, someone has to spend 20 minutes, right? You got to chop the root, then you got to segregate the bad leaves, then you got to remove dirt, all of that. The benchmark result says only 50 to 60% of it is usable when you buy 300 grams greens. So when you compare the usable part, right, this difference of 50% getting wasted in the consumer mind does not get factored. They only see I'm paying X here, but hydroponics is costing me 1.5x or 2x. But the fact that 50% gets wasted means that your actual price that you would have paid for the produce is pretty much the same as in a greenhouse or a hydroponic produce, right? So one is that. So in a greenhouse or a hydroponic produce, as I said, tends to come without root. 90% of it is usable, right? That's point number one. Point number two is just the freshness and the fragrance and the shelf life. Now, our own consumers are telling that when they buy greens from us, which is hydroponic grown, they can keep it in a fridge. And even after 10 days, if someone opens a coriander or a basil, it still continues to remain fragrant, right? While it is usually not the case when you buy from an open field produce, because it's already gone through 24 to 36 hours of being in the open, handled multiple times, right? So the shelf life is shorter, the taste tends to vary, the crunchiness will definitely be much better, the shelf life tends to be better. It's much more easier from a cooking experience point of view, that you don't have to spend a whole lot of time cleaning and things like that. So therefore, while the inherent price premium will be there, it may be 20% or 50% or 60%. The value that it brings sometimes goes, uncomputed, or it goes unsaid. Actually, the benefits.
Okay. But typically, what would the price increase be by? Just to
Yeah, as I
give
said,
an
yeah,
andaza?
it can be anywhere in the range of 20% to 50%
20 to
more.
50% more.
Yeah,
Okay. And then the value is how you should start seeing it and thinking about it.
exactly.
Because I
Yeah,
remember this.
exactly.
I remember the first time that I had bought hydroponics, I had never tasted fruits never tasted leaves like that in my life.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
It's comparable to anything that I'd eaten abroad. It was just
yeah,
amazing, the
yeah.
quality. And then you
So
start
actually,
thinking about it.
people actually tend to make sometimes nutritional claims, that something grown in hydroponic is nutritionally better. I mean, even that argument aside, which technically need not be true, because it's the same. If you start from the same seed, right, it consumes the same nutrients that it wants in the proportion that it wants, as long as it's available, right? So even the nutrition value aside, the things that you are telling, whether it's the aroma, or whether it's the taste, or whether it's the crunchiness, or it's the, and most of the greens, by the way, tend to be consumed rawish, unlike a vegetable, especially in an Indian cooking context, which goes into a tawa, or which goes into a pressure cooker, right? Most greens tend to be consumed rawish, and therefore the taste is also very apparent to the user. And therefore, someone who makes a switch to greenhouse or hydroponic produce and gets accustomed to it, right? For them, if they switch back to a regular produce, it's extremely tangible. So they immediately know that, okay, this tasting something different, right? So that is a big advantage. Like, beyond a point, you don't have to sell the concept of greenhouse or hydroponic, because to the user, by sight, by taste, by experience, it just becomes extremely tangible.
Okay. Lovely. Fantastic. What are some of the final thoughts that you would have that you want to leave our consumers with, our listeners with?
Yes, yeah. So I think, as I said, I mean, if you look at an overarching ecosystem around health, wellness, I think clean eating is absolutely becoming a very important facet, right? And amongst that, fruits and vegetables plays a very important role, right? So, from being a low involvement category, it is slowly bubbling to a top of the mind conscious activity as to what they eat, when they eat, how they eat. Diet is becoming a very important element, right? And in this journey, it is extremely crucial about how those fruits and vegetables are grown. And today, I think consumers have adequate choices when it comes to embracing clean choices. Consumers have already are already embracing cleaner, sustainable choices. There is no reason why today consumers should not embrace a cleaner and sustainable choice when it comes to fruits and vegetables, which I said is more a direct consumption related thing in their life as opposed to fashion, right? And today there are choices around. Unfortunately, the flip side is, especially post COVID, there's been a lot of noise around farm to home, organic, greenhouse, hydroponic, etc. While the space has seen a lot of activity, it has also seen a lot of clutter. But my humble suggestion or a submission to the audience is that we don't have to go by anything that everyone is claiming, right? If someone spends a little bit of time just sifting through the clutter and see who are these brands and players who are truly there in it for the long run, right? Who are able to address all of your concerns of not just where was it grown, but how was it grown, and how is the promise of clean getting translated. How are they able to convince the consumer that their fruit is carbide free when it comes to ripening and things like that, right? So today choices are there, some are not well known. So if a consumer spends a little bit of time, they will be able to like relate to brands and embrace them and make it a core part of their living. Because again, as I said, not a low it's a low involvement category, but an extremely important category in our day-to-day living, right? So I think there are choices out there. Sustainability is very important in what we do, be it with the farmers or be it with the consumers. And it doesn't have to be one at the cost of another. You don't have to shortchange a farmer to keep the consumer happy. You don't have to overcharge a consumer to keep a farmer happy. I think the today the supply chain is heading in the right direction of ensuring an equitable balance between farmers and consumers. Options exist. Consumers just have to slightly sift through the clutter, and they will find choices that are offering them fresh, clean, contamination-free produce that will aid in the overall, yeah, clean eating and healthy living aspect of life, actually.
Lovely. I think it's just asking the right questions, becoming more
Exactly.
concerned, becoming more conscious about what's going in your mouth and the way that we're thinking about it.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. Avinash, how can people find out more about what you do in Deep-Rooted?
Yeah, so I think we have a fairly so we have, for especially audience in Bangalore and Hyderabad, they can go to the Play Store or the App Store and download our app. Deep Space Rooted is what they'll have to search for. We also have an e-commerce website. People can go to deep-rooted.co. They can read about the brand, the journey, the philosophy, the vision that with which we are working on. Would also urge consumers in these two cities to give a try and experience for themselves and not just go by what I'm telling, because practice what you preach. So just don't go by what I'm telling. Please feel free to try our range of produce. So we are practically a one-stop shop for F&B needs of a consumer.
Lovely. Superb. Avinash, thank you so much for coming on the Habit Coach podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com, or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME180. That's Awesome 180.
Come learn and experience the ABCDs of being queer with me, Shunetro,
and me, Farhad,
on our show, Gay BCD.
The two of us take you through our stories and experiences of being gay men in the city of Mumbai and have candid
and sometimes downright scandalous
conversations about sexuality, gay culture, and everything in between.
Catch new episodes of Gay BCD every Tuesday on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get all your podcasts from.
From uncensored and unfiltered chats with the who's who of the entertainment industry, I, Siddharth Kannan, bring you a very heartcake chat show called Candid Kannan. Tune in every Friday on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.